Hello and welcome to the preview show edition of the Blue Monday podcast, a 3 times weekly show looking into all things Ipswich Town. I'm glad to return as your host. My name is Rich Woodward and I'm joined by the brilliant Harry from Bath. Harry, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Rich. Great to see you. Great to see you, and thanks everybody for joining in and listening. Lots of interesting Twitter questions that we're going to pick up on and have a proper look. I was at Derby during the week, and I think you watched it on the box, Rich.
I was
and
being
also,
armchair,
and also we'll put the the magnifying glass, I should say, on Sheffield Wednesday and see what might come at us on Saturday.
Absolutely, yeah, and I thank you for the kind words last week as well. That means a lot to us, and I think we made some really good calls. I say we, I mean 99% you, Harry. I think I got a good call about Aiden playing left wing, so I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that.
No, that was you. Yeah, that was you.
Yeah, some nice words. I'm trying to find some on Twitter. Yeah, Harry. Here's a tip. If you want to be mentioned on the podcast, give Harry or I a compliment and I will read it out. So Harry Butcher. Harry, can you answer this question? Why are you so good at picking the bones out so carefully of other teams? I think you are amazing and fascinating to listen to. Well, there you go.
Oh,
that's
blushing,
a compliment.
Blushing.
It's the Harry's, it's Team Harry. Come on.
Solidarity.
And I thank you for the kind mentions of my sound-alikes. Barney Ronay, a journalist, and Boy George was a bit of a bolt from the blue there. I don't know how to process that, but I think it's a compliment, so I take that. Let's, keeping in the Boy George spirit, let's talk about the culture club that is Frank Lampard's Derby. Cha-ching, that's one of my culture club references. And let's go to Frank Lampard's Derby, Harry. You made the trip up. What are your thoughts?
It was interesting. I think there's a consensus. I think we all... There are common themes that I think everybody's picked up on. The game itself was very disjointed from two teams who are both trying to play passing football, and both of whom are really struggling to score because they actually couldn't put any moves together. Lots of misread runs, inaccurate passes, opponents interrupting. You'd have a 3 or 4 move pass and then somebody would get a foot in to break up the pass. There was no rhythm because there wasn't enough tempo. There's still two teams really still finding their feet.
Yes.
Both broadly playing a similar type of football. That was what I picked up on.
Yeah, I think they probably had the better wide players. So Lawrence obviously was one we know quite well. Though Donatian did quite a good job on him.
He would, totally.
And I think your point about the game kind of being punctuated by kind of stoppages was also important. Keogh and Forsyth got yellow cards for possible breakaways there, which didn't help. But I thought both teams cancelled each other out. I thought Derby had quite a lot of possession, but unnecessary possession or fairly unexciting possession that was in their own half. And I thought we cancelled them out and actually grew into the first half and ended it probably the better team.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It was they were very streetwise. The two fouls, I think it was Keogh and Bryson, both took Ward out.
Yeah.
It was a little lesson to our lads. It's a streetwise league, and when you do get something promising, teams will happily do that. Derby weren't dirty in any way at all. They weren't. We've seen. There are other teams who will have worse disciplinary records, but that said, they weren't afraid when the taking yellow cards for the team was very much part of it. I wondered whether we could have targeted Keogh a little bit more. I think Steve said that on TWTD, and I wonder whether that was us being a little bit naive.
He's certainly not a ball-playing centre-back, is he?
No, he's not. And particularly after that foul, just maybe if we could have got Jackson on him, but. A couple of things. The themes that I think we all know this anyway, getting the team 10 yards further up the pitch, getting them closer to the striker, because when you had Jackson or Harrison, the two different types, one a good header with the ball, one with pace, it was all just a little bit disjointed in that sense. I think it was an interesting lesson for Edwards up against Forsyth. Forsyth he's been a fullback for Derby since 2013, I think. He's a streetwise championship operator, and it was quite a good lesson. In some ways, Donatian was brilliant defensively, shutting Lawrence down, but I did wonder he wasn't able to get up the way he was against Exeter he wasn't quite the foil he was at Exeter for Edwards, but it was a good lesson for Edwards, I think, and he got him.
Yeah,
He did him a couple of times. He got past him, but that's, he'll go away and study that video. These little victories we were talking about a few weeks back.
yeah.
This is the kind of stuff which we will learn from as each game goes by.
I mean, Edwards
Um,
had a really great game against Villa, so he's not going to. And I think Ben's kind of already kind of reconciled the thought that Edwards is going to have good games and bad games, and he
yeah.
might kind of flatter to deceive a few times. But
Yeah.
Villa, he was great.
Mm,
That kind of a performance like that, and the possible
mhm.
great goal that he could have scored against Villa. Those are videos that Derby will have seen, won't they? And now they know
Yeah.
exactly what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. He and Nolan were targeted, no question.
yeah,
You could see that, yeah. And what I saw, sort of nothing, not malicious, but just clever fouls in safe areas.
yeah,
There were a few. There were a few of those, definitely.
yeah.
One small point I'd make, and Paul Hurst picked up on this, that we were getting more attempts than our opponents.
Yeah,
It's
I've
a
heard that today.
it's a basic and obvious corollary to that. Our finishing. Derby scored 2 goals because they got 2 shots broadly on target. And if there's a way, there is that argument that even if you get the flakiest thing at the goal, it does improve. It helps,
Yeah,
and it's that where the couple of times we were getting some shots in, but they were from safe areas when we really threatened. But then it's simple and obvious and easy to say. But my sense is Hurst has picked up on that. It's just because the finishing is now at a higher level. But that as I say, as 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 the games go by, as the pattern evolves, and hopefully as we get on the front foot more, and as I say, get that bit closer to the strikers, more chances will come, and they'll get more chance to practice that.
yeah.
Um,
I picked up on the same thing about what Hurst said today in his press conference
yeah,
about the more efforts than the opposition, but
mm,
shots on target. I think all I can remember are kind of low shots that went
yeah,
wide of the goal. And as you
yeah,
say, if the keeper's not having to do any work, then that's not a great sign, is it? So
yeah,
volume is there. Quality just needs to improve, doesn't it? I think
yeah, yeah,
that's it.
yeah. I think it's a question of time. It's a question of time as it all comes together. Yeah. What else? Mental as well as physical tiredness. We don't have a big squad, and this was the fourth game in 11 days. And if I've done my maths right, and I wondered whether part of the reason we didn't put on the high press that Millwall and others had to Derby and Leeds did was maybe there was I wouldn't say it's not a criticism, but I just wonder whether we were sort of playing the percentages a little bit with a small squad and also with them all going through this massive learning curve.
Yeah,
5 games, it'll literally be, it'll be Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. That's a lot to take on board. It's a hell of a stretch for this new squad that we've put together. But that's not making excuses. But it was just something I kind of opened a little bank account on with so many games coming on top of each other because
yeah.
we didn't squeeze them as much. But
Well,
anyway,
and
yeah,
we did. To be fair, we talked about Villa in the same way
yeah,
against us last week. We kind
yeah,
of had a view that Brentford might have half an eye. Sorry, Villa would have half an eye on Brentford. And I
yeah,
don't know if you saw the Villa game last night. It was really good actually, and Villa actually were much better than I thought they were on Saturday. So maybe
yeah.
there was some truth in that. And I think you're probably right. Is Derby or Sheffield Wednesday the more winnable game? Debatable, but if you're maybe a goal down or 2 goals down, are you going to keep pressing? Are you going to keep running around the pitch?
Yeah,
Probably not. Are you going to keep
yeah,
stuff in the bank for Saturday? I would
yeah,
guess so. So I think you've probably got some, so a fair thought there. Um,
yeah. It's a thought. It's been interesting to hear what people have to say about it. Definitely. Yeah,
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 I mean, I guess I've talked about this before on the flagship show, and we've had a question about it. So I'll put it to you, and maybe word it in a slightly politer way, if that's right, Lee. At Ginger Eagle 73 about the reaction to the game more than anything else. Um, Kind of the expectations that success needs to be instantaneous, and we're good one week and not so good the next.
yeah,
I guess the message, certainly my viewpoint, is if you buy into the Hurst philosophy and the way of going about things, and you accept that been such a turnaround in players, it's we're going to need time, aren't we?
yeah.
And I guess getting excited about the league table in August is probably not healthy for anyone. Have you got any thoughts on that one, Harry?
Well, I don't know. In February, sometimes you'll go on. I mean, on the TWTD site, there's a great form table when you go and look at the fixtures, and you can cut it in any way at all. Your last 6 home games, your last 6 away games, whatever. And you look at it in February, and you look at the form table where there are 6 games listed, and what relation does that bear to the overall season? It's got some influence, but it's not. It's small in the scheme of things. As is this. Somebody put up a brilliant tweet I saw listing the league table at the end of August last year, and I think Fulham and Brentford were right down at the bottom. And look where they ended up. I think the first win is a psychological moment, though. I do think it is, because that 3 points at this time of the year is grossly disproportionate, and it can literally. I mean, we had it last year when we had that brilliant start under Mick. We suddenly were, you're looking, you're thinking, my God, we're 7 points clear of, of sixth place kind of thing, because there's been so few games played. No, perspective is needed, I think. And as I say, mid-October, that's when we'll have a proper idea.
I think so too. And I'm pretty certain that after the first 5 games of last season, no one expected us to win the title, did they? So I think managing expectations and a bit of self-regulation. I mean, social media is great for this, isn't it? It's all about now. And I think everyone just needs to, I think I said, be nice to each other. I think just be respect of opinions, but also kind of give a bit of patience and time, and let's see where we are, as you say, mid-October. That was
good question,
Frank Lampard. Yeah, it's a good thought, and it certainly there was a brouhaha kind of after Exeter and a bit of a brouhaha after Derby. Certainly, I don't think as extreme as perhaps maybe it's been made out to be. But anyway, let's move on to hopefully more positive things. And going slightly further up the road, the motorway to Sheffield Wednesday. A team in a really strange situation, a team with a transfer embargo during the summer that was lifted, I think, last week. So couldn't do a huge amount of business and had maybe a bit of a tricky start. And then suddenly things might have clicked last night against Millwall. Can you bring us kind of up to speed on Sheffield Wednesday in respect of maybe players who've gone out and how the system's kind of evolved and things that have been tried out in the last few weeks?
Well, in terms of players, nobody has come in. A couple of contract extensions for Nuhiu, Pudel. Lucas Joao signed a contract extension this week as well, the winger they've got, or winger come striker. The main departures were Glenn Loovens. A lot of these were sort of veterans, really. Loovens, Ross Wallace, Jack Hunt went to Bristol City, the right back, Jordan Rhodes on season-long loan to Norwich. So they were the main. It was kind of more a thinning out of what was a somewhat inflated squad, I think, more than anything else. But just as equally, what they have done is they've, if I can use the verb signed in a slightly odd way, they've signed a lot of their youth products. They've brought a lot of young players come through, which was
important on Tuesday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
Wednesday.
And it's Wednesday against Millwall, and Ben will have picked up on this as well. He'd have seen a little bit of a Brentford last week. This is they've decided to evolve that way rather than just relying on the old guard. And in some ways, the fans are saying that the newer players who are coming through seem to be fitting in with the team model a lot more fluently than a lot of the players who were kind of stuck halfway up the tubes. Somebody made an interesting comment about when you looked at what was on Sheffield Wednesday's bench against Millwall against what was on the field. They had it was quite stellar.
I read the same.
Yeah.
Just quick pausing, if we can, on the exits and a favourite topic of everyone on the Ipswich Town Twitter, Jordan Rhodes. Joshua has asked us whether there's any kind of opinions on that departure. Is he missed? I think obviously he's got some playoff baggage there. I think I've talked about that before, penalty misses in playoffs and such. Is there any sadness with Rhodes being out of the building, or is it, as you say, kind of thinning down the squad and maybe he's been surplus to requirements?
Yeah, he's not missed. We have much better attacking players than Rhodes. It's the old Jordan Rhodes debate, and the first time I came across it was when we played Blackburn. And it's the old, apart from the 30 goals a season, what else did he bring to the team kind of narrative. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did score against the Blades, which was brownie points. That was well appreciated.
Yes,
but
I've celebrated as well.
Yes, he did actually. That's right. They said a poacher who needs an attacking flair, pace, and delivery into goal-scoring areas. He needs an able midfield behind him who can create. This is all stuff that Blackburn was saying years ago, that he's, if you put it on a plate for him, he will finish.
Yeah.
He's brilliant at finishing, but you have to really set the whole thing up around him. And I think particularly given their early travails where the midfield was failing to click, he would have been absolutely useless in that sense. You need to set the whole thing up for him. So yeah, it's this came up. I remember when we played Blackburn a few years ago, because I was intrigued to say, well, what are they going to say about him? Because it was still, the emotions were still high after his departure. Still, people felt. I'll never forget the day he left. I couldn't believe it when Keane let him go. Absolutely floored me, that did. But that's what they say. He's a great poacher, but ... Yeah. So, and given who else they have in their squad, I mean, they've got players like Hooper. I know he's not there in at the moment. Fletcher. They have Matthias can switch in. Joao can switch in.
Yeah.
Nuhiu is a good bench option as well. So, what does he do? Yeah, it would be the question. Yeah,
big wages too, presumably.
Yeah.
I mean, we will. I suspect we will come back to Jordan Rhodes next weekend as well. Perhaps. Is there a game next week? I can't remember. There might be some big fixture next week. I can't remember. Let's go back to Sheffield Wednesday. And back to what we were saying about systems and players. Quite a big shift in selection and system, you think, between Sunday and the Brentford defeat and what I thought was quite a surprise and probably quite a decent victory against Millwall last night on Wednesday night. What's changed?
The Millwall win was merited. It wasn't a lucky win. They controlled the shape, disposition of the game, and only let Millwall into it near the end. It was the last 20 minutes when Millwall came back at them. Before Millwall, and one owl after the Brentford defeat compared them to a poor man's Jaap Stam's Reading. That's how he described it. Badly played Dutch football with loads of possession but lacking any tempo or purpose. So some bright moments, but ultimately insignificant. Luhukai was playing, the manager was playing a 3-5-2 system, and it was misfiring. It worked against Sunderland in the League Cup, but it didn't really gel. They don't actually have a proper left wing back, was a big discussion they were having as well. They actually don't have the players to play the system, and it was leaving the back three vulnerable. So he switched at Brentford to a 4 at the back and 3 in midfield, 4-2-3-1. Against Millwall, he went with a 4-3-3. He had 2 out and out wingers, and sometimes the manager will hit on a formula that clicks and it'll catch opponents out, and this is what happened on Wednesday. Whether they're going to go on a kamikaze run up the league and in the playoffs, I'm not so sure. But you often see teams having a good run of 6 to 8 games until opponents actually work out how to knock this on the head. Norwich did that to us last year. Remember, they got belted by Millwall, and then they kind of reconfigured things, and then they came to Portland Road. Another story.
Oh, we're generally courteous when teams are on a bad one, aren't we? We usually help them out.
Bristol City. Hang on, hold my beer.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did they do? The changes. Well, the big thing was they were more direct. One of them said it took 6 passes to put pressure on Millwall as opposed to 12 at Brentford. They stopped trying to pass out from the back because apart from Daniel Pudel, who didn't play against Millwall, they don't really have any footballing defenders who can actually do that. So they decided to be a little bit more direct, a little bit more sort of in Millwall's face, and that actually it gave them a proper foothold in the game, and Millwall didn't see it coming. They also then beat the high press, because Millwall the previous week had played, and last weekend when they played Derby, they stifled Derby in their own.
Didn't it? Yeah.
It did work. It properly did. Yeah. And so that was the first thing. There was an injection of urgency and tempo as well with the players with the switch arounds that they did. They took out Sam Hutchinson from the midfield, and they brought in Adam Reach. And you had Pelupessy, who was sitting, and then Reach and Bannon, who were, I think Reach was more of a sitter. He's kind of more left-sided, but he would have been He was, whether he was box to box or sitting is it's a moot point. Point was him and Bannon were getting forward. They were, and Reach is a good foil for Bannon in midfield. Barry Bannon has been the dynamo, but he's needed other people to work with him, and it seems that they found a way of doing this. So they were taking the game to Millwall. They were bombing forward. They were making clever runs, and they were also therefore getting close to Stephen Fletcher. Now, the way they sum up Stephen Fletcher is he's an old school number 9. He doesn't have much pace. He can hold the ball up though, and he can bring other players into play. He's an experienced striker. Suddenly, you had these two midfielders who were able to connect with him, and he also played two good wingers. He had Marco Matthias on the left, and instead he played on the right against Brentford. He swapped him over. He dropped Forestieri, and he brought in one of two rookies, Fraser Preston, a 19-year-old, who had come on against Brentford, that played in a more of an attacking midfield role. He switched him to the right wing, and these guys were offering directness, they were offering pace, they were stretching the Millwall defence, and suddenly the party was happening at that end of the pitch rather than what they'd had at Brentford, where they were having to, they were sort of firefighting for most of the game. So it was these shifts in dynamic made a huge difference. Matthias also, they've got this guy, a new left back, Matt Penny. These are the young kids I was talking about. They're kind of the new signings. Left back, he came on as a substitute against Brentford, and he. What was the phrase they used? He said he steamed into some of Millwall's forwards like a freight train, which always is a
made an early impression.
Image.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you bet he did. So he's obviously these are rookie players, but they're coming in. They know no fear, and they're just playing brilliantly. Matthias though was very good as a left winger because he was actually coming back to cover. They said he was fantastic all evening. He didn't leave his rookie left back on his own, and so he was giving him proper support. So you had this balance then, as I say. You had Liam Palmer as well, who was enervated at right back by having with Preston suddenly really pushing forward at the other end as well. So it gave them some good wide balance, as well as the two midfielders coming up. So it all suddenly just clicked. Everything just clicked into place. And as I say, the action was at Millwall's end of the field.
Yeah, so strange. Sorry, just quickly on
the
kind of midfield pair. You said it was Bannon and Reach. Reach is a strange one because I know of Reach as a left winger, I think. And I guess the thought, and I don't know whether this came out in any of the feedback on the forums, is whether that was kind of stumbled across or was a necessity, or whether it was a piece of managerial genius, which it might have been.
He's evolved into the role. When he was at Borough, if memory serves me right, shoot me down if I'm wrong, but I think I've got this right. He was originally a sort of left back come left midfielder.
Yeah.
And then he moved forward into left midfield. And then when they started playing in a 3, maybe it's because how old is Reach now? Just check his date.
He's getting close to 30,
no, he's not. He's only 25. He's not that old. But he's kind of players. Players evolve. It's into positions. But he's ended up, certainly last year, he was playing as a left-sided central midfielder. Carvajal did play mostly 4-4-2, and I know in that he was certainly playing as a left midfielder. I remember that definitely. But he's kind of, as time has gone on, I think it was Luhukai moved him into the left of a midfield 3, as it were. But it means that he's now got proximity to Bannon, and it also means that he has that within him, so if he does need to move out, he can do. So it just gives them a bit more geometry, I think.
We'll come back to Luhukai. He's a bit of bit of an unknown quantity, and the opinion of him has kind of moved around a bit. But I wanted to kind of dwell a little bit on Barry Bannon, who I think you said needed the fall in Reach, and that's clearly helped him to kind of be able to express himself further up the pitch. Great player, Bannon. Had a really great game at Portman Road last season, if I remember rightly, and scored an absolute belter last night as well. A great goal last night. What's the thoughts on Barry Bannon? I guess he's the critical player, and an injury to him might be pretty significant, I guess.
Yeah, he's the one you have to shut down. He's not a prolific goal scorer. I think that goal he scored last night was his first one in, I think it was several years. He's not a finisher, but what he does do is the word dynamism. Basically, he takes control, he beats men, he puts through balls through. The other thing they were saying was that as time has gone on, he's developed a very good understanding with Stephen Fletcher. And that is actually more dangerous in a way than his understanding with Reach. Yep. If him and Fletcher are starting to read each other, then that's a covalent bond we need to break it basically, and do everything we can to stop, because he could be a really good supply line, even if Fletcher isn't scoring, into Fletcher and then trouble.
Recycles, doesn't he, and sends it out wide. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a danger. He takes control. The Duracell reference was made. Our one-man midfielder, he's everywhere, is what they say. There is one thing to mention, though. If they're struggling, and this came up in some of the earlier match day threads when teams were sort of really, when they just were misfiring, he was getting very frustrated with the bench, holding his arms out, just saying, why? What's the plan here? Help me! But also, he ended up with this motif of playing. They called it 50-meter Hollywood balls because he was obviously trying to get something going. He was trying to kickstart the motor,
Yeah.
and it just simply wasn't happening. So if they are really struggling and you see him playing these Hollywood passes to nowhere, you kind of it's a small thing to think, well, maybe we've actually we've got a foothold in this game, and that's often it was something that came up regularly. But basically, he runs the show for them. It's energy mid. He's an incisive passer. He can beat men, and I mean, Ben even said it last week in the Brentford game. He was the single standout player in many, certainly the standout outfield player that they had. Yeah,
Feels like he fits the kind of diminutive midfielder role that a
yeah,
Ryan Woods or even maybe a
yeah,
John Nolan fits.
yeah,
I wonder. We talked about Grealish being the kind of the pivot for Villa last week, and he certainly was involved in a lot last Saturday, good
yeah,
and bad. Your advice to Hurst, if you were to give it on Bannon, presumably would be to try and mark him out of the game or close him
yeah.
down,
Put
presumably.
yeah, put you would. He would be the one person to but he yeah, unquestionably he is their principal danger man, I think. So I'm intrigued to see who he plays out wide. He will certainly. I'd be stunned when you've had such a good performance. The temptation is to go with the same team. The problem, as I say, with Forestieri is he enough of a team player? Lucas Joao has got pace and power. If he's fit, he could come in and he could also give a wide threat. And
Scored against
as I
us
said,
last season, didn't he? I think
he
as
did,
well.
he did,
Yeah.
he did as well. And obviously they've got Fraser Preston as well, who's outside. So whereas with Villa, we knew that their wide threats were somewhat blunted in a way. Adoma wasn't. He's still trying to find his form.
Didn't have a good game,
Um,
by the way. And a great
yeah,
call, by the way, whilst we're at it, on McGinn. McGinn was great for them, obviously
yeah,
got an assist
yeah,
as well. So
yeah,
it was a good spot, the two of those for
yeah.
Villa.
Yeah. You could argue that reach is to Bannon as McGinn is to Grealish,
Mm.
in that, it's with midfields, it's always a question of balance. It's a question of combining the three. And the third person in the midfield is Joey Pelupessy, who has really struggled. They say he's a terrible footballing, he's primarily a holding midfielder. But what they did say he does do is he's got very good positional awareness. He's got good energy and a good awareness of where to be. So even though he can't do much with the ball, he will be he'll be in the right place to
Yeah,
get the ball. And they say just get the ball and just give it to Bannon and just that's your job
he'll be
basically.
the one making those
Yeah,
tactical fouls that we were
yeah,
talking about for Derby, possibly.
exactly that. He would be the one you would have thought. I can't see Hutchinson playing. I don't know. He had a poor game against Brentford, and Ben picked up on it. He made it was a careless foul to give Brentford their opening goal, the penalty. And Brentford don't need any favours, as we know. The theme with Hutchinson, and this goes back over the years as well. I remember when he sort of first came to them from Chelsea. It's the lack of discipline, and I mean the penalty is one example, but also he's had a history. When you go an Owls forum, you know it's coming before you've read it. Yellow and red cards and injuries. There's no kind of restraint. And several of them said this against Brentford, that he was dropping into the back line instead of being a holding midfielder. He was actually Brentford were putting them under such pressure that he was actually dropping in almost an extra defender. It'd be interesting to see if Ben would agree, but that was a consensus that came across. But
Definitely.
yeah, interesting midfield. But I'd say whatever about the wingers, I think that Palupesi, Reach, and Bannon will start against us. I've no doubt about that. Yeah.
Do you think these rookie players will start, or do you think going back to the kind of 4 games in 2 weeks, do you think that's too much for them? Do you think more experienced heads, the more experienced bench, will make their way onto the pitch to start on Saturday?
I'd be intrigued to see. If I was him, I'd leave them on. I mean, you've got Pudel isn't the left back though. That's the problem. So you wouldn't be really able to switch him in for Penny because he's a good left-sided central defender or in the back three, but he doesn't have the legs anymore to get up and down. And he really, Edwards a one-on-one against Pudel, we would be very happy with. I can tell you that.
Yep.
That would be a danger. So whether he'd it'll be interesting to see how he does do it. He could rejig the defence, put Pudel in as the left centre back, and move Thornley out, Jordan Thornley. We haven't talked about their centre defence yet. And Jordan Thornley is another player. Now, how old is he? He is 21. He was an Everton youth product who they brought in 2016. So effectively, he's come up again through the last 2 years. He's come up through Wednesday's system, and another young discovery, if I can describe him like that. And they see him as a future captain.
Wow.
He's a more solid partner for Lees, gets stuck in, and Millwall targeted him. They use the word bombardment, which comes up regularly with Millwall, actually. Bomber Harris and all that. They love it.
Yeah, Morrison,
but he's not a ball player, nor is Lees. But the problem with Lees, I remember Lees, I should say, got red carded against us for a reckless foul when he was with Warnock's Leeds, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back at Portman Road.
Wow, that's a shout.
It was back in Mick's first season, I think. I remember we won the game, and then we found everybody else had won their games. It was when the whole bottom of the table went on a mad dash up. It was a mad season, that. But he does miss Glenn Louvens, Tom Lees. Louvens, we remember the foul he did on McGoldrick last year, and he really had lost his pace. As you say, he's up in Scotland now. But they said that he's not a captain, he's not an organiser at the back line. And shaky on the ball as well. But if he has a good partner with him, you'll get, he will be a lot better. And they think that Lees and Thornley between them are that could be the long term combination. But as I say, it'll have to be tested. But Thornley could switch out. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just behind those two. Keeper situation. Is there another rookie in goal? Am I making things up there?
Cameron Dawson, 23 years old. And Ben was actually full of praise for him, as were the Owls Wednesday fans at Brentford. Safe pair of hands, good on one-on-ones. There's a big conspiracy theory as to why Kieran Westwood is now currently third choice, because I think Joe Wildsmith came in for the Sunderland Carabao Cup match, and there's a whole, what Kieran Westwood, Republic of Ireland international, great provenance, etc. Why is he the third choice keeper? It's a big call. We'll come on to Luhukai in a second. It's a big call Luhukai has made. He's decided Cameron Dawson is his number one.
I would suggest that I maybe off camera you didn't see me kind of do that symbol, Harry. I think money is usually a factor when decisions like that. If he's due another contract, or if there's money due, I think he was a free from Sunderland. I can't remember. But I was rating him. There was a point where we were linked with him, I think under Jewel, in the summer, and he was at Coventry at the time, and living up there, they were raving about it, and I had a few people kind of warning me that I was in danger of harm if we signed Kieran Westwood and then he went off somewhere else. But I really like him. So, but clearly, Luki has found another option there that's working for him. So.
Yeah. Now it's not on the level of Nyland for Villa, but there was a phrase, the odd spill. But I don't think it's what we saw last week with Villa. But I think there's the odd Rick. But as I say, Brentford threw the kitchen sink at him, and there was the wide consensus was he wasn't responsible for the goals that were conceded. He seems to have grown into the role.
And if Millwall are pumping balls as they would to Morrison, then
that's, he commands his box. That was another thing that kept coming up regularly. Yeah.
Let's shift to the other end of the pitch if we could. I just want to talk about the strikers, and I've got their squad up here. And you've mentioned Fletcher. We've mentioned Newhugh as well. Jow, Forestieri briefly. Matthias as well. You've got Sam Winnell in there, Gary Hooper in there. And Rhodes out on loan. That's some options there, isn't it, for Sheffield Wednesday? That is pretty impressive. We think Fletcher's likely to keep his place in the team.
Fletcher will start, no question. Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, not a great finisher, but he works his heart out. He really does. And he's knowledge and experience, and he's a good foil for literally everybody working around him if they can replicate Wednesday.
Because Newhugh had started the season, didn't he? And
he did.
I think when they played us last season and he scored that last minute equaliser, I think he was on the scrap heap from what I gather, and that kind of won him back into favour. And then I think he had a few more goal scoring moments, and then I think the mood on him changed, didn't it?
It did. He was elevated in status. Let us politely call it that. That status may have descended somewhat, though. Phrases like "can't get any slower," having a shocker, blundering around like an idiot. That's
Well,
pretty
I
much.
hope he starts, Frank. Well, no, maybe I don't. Maybe he
We-
just saves his goals for us, perhaps.
no, I mean
Um,
I've written down three words here: pace, ball control, and new contract. And there was the suspicion, the cynical Owls are saying he got a new contract, and maybe that might have that he may not be quite as motivated as he was. But that's being very cynical.
lifted his game
That's
for the
indeed, yeah, he
contract.
lifted his game for a bit.
So Forestieri then feels to me a kind of a marquee player similar to Bannon.
Mm.
So what's the? I guess he will start Saturday. But what's the chat on Forestieri and his role in the team?
It'll be fascinating to see because there was him and Matthias, him on the left. He's broadly left-sided, and if you're playing a 4-3-3 or however you configure it with one striker, that's his best position. They say he's absolutely at his best in a three. Playing him centrally with his back to goal is no use. He needs a little bit of space on the left, which he can pick up, and he can either run at players, he can play 1-2s, or he can thread killer passes through, or he can finish. He needs a little bit of space in which to operate. But do you play him in front of a rookie left back? It seemed that for the balance of the team, and this is where Luhukai again, a bit like with the keeper, putting in Dawson, suddenly the fans are going, hang on, he's made a few very bold calls here. One of them was not playing Forestieri against Millwall, because fans were really worried when they saw that lineup on Wednesday. They thought, bloody hell, what's going on here? This could go badly wrong. But Fessy was on the bench. He came on as a substitute, but he switched across Matthias to the left to protect his defender, and then he had a rookie right winger. And as I say, it's how much of a team player is he would be the issue.
So it's a selection for the betterment of the team rather than
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Well, that's a big call
yeah,
then, and you've got the win to justify the decision. I guess if you go,
yeah,
you don't want to break up a winning team,
yeah.
but quite a big player to have sat on the bench, and
Uh,
presumably quite a difficult character to manage as well.
yeah. Was it the Norwich game where he didn't get on the bus a few years ago?
There was a
Do you remember
transfer request
it was a
situation,
transfer
wasn't there?
request. It was, yeah, he was agitating, I think, if memory
Oh.
serves me right. Yeah. Who else is there? I mean, the other players who they've talked about, Joao, as I said, the word pace and power are the two words they use for him. That he is. It's just doing it can he do it more regularly, and can he incorporate a goal threat into his game? I haven't double checked the statistics, but they were saying something like um, 20 goals in something like 3 years. They feel that he's not, there hasn't been enough of he hasn't been a strong enough finisher. So he'll get you off your seat, but it may not necessarily follow through with an end product, as it were. Um, the other player who has been used as a bench option is poor George Boyd.
I was going to mention him. Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't know I completely missed that he was at Sheffield Wednesday, and
yeah,
he did. It was a great signing for Burnley, and was almost a signing at the same time when we got Taylor. Um,
yeah.
how is it being used by Sheffield
Mm,
Wednesday?
not great.
No.
Lacking pace. He started in the game against, just to double check. Yeah, he did start I thought he did against Sunderland in their Carabao Cup match, and then he came off the bench to the astonishment of a lot of Owls against Millwall. Lack of pace. The cruelest comment I found was that he looks like he's tethered by by a large elastic band.
Oh
You can
wow.
see his legs go. You can see his legs going, but he gets nowhere and then falls over. It's a rather sort of graphic and brutal image, but
Yes.
but he could be. It's a bit, but within the team, you don't necessarily have to be a good player, because I mean, he brought on Boyd, Nuhiu, and Forestieri against Millwall, a game which they won, and yet they were all decent bench options in the end. I know Millwall came at them, but maybe they could be useful to help. They could have a role in ensuring in sort of short save, keeping winning them a point or winning them 3 points at the end. So they may have a role. The other two players, as I say, you mentioned, Hooper hasn't featured, Winnell hasn't featured either.
Right.
So they haven't featured. Abdi, I know, was injured. He's been out for that reason. So as I say, you look at some of the other players, David Jones. Who else is there? Is listed? No, Jack Lee's a youth product, but they have got a lot of the players that came in that splurge that they did a few years ago. It's almost like buying a load of really fresh fruit and vegetables, and they have shelf lives, and a lot of them are starting to, if you can't put them in a casserole, well, you might as well get rid of them. Yeah,
I love it
it's
now.
actually a bizarre image.
No, well, I was going to say. I mean, we talked about personnel and systems. I think
Yeah,
we'll have a minute on Luhukai as well, just
yeah,
to kind of sum it up there. Sheffield Wednesday as a club at the moment are in. I don't know whether we've touched on this already, but in such a weird situation because you rewind the season, and that was a team that expected to do things under Carvajal,
yeah,
and it didn't happen, and destined for playoffs, and it didn't really happen. And the transfer embargo and the general integration of more youth players into the squad, clearly the enforced inability to sign players as well. But it does feel like a team that's kind of cutting its cloth accordingly, and
yeah,
presumably expectations have shifted
yeah,
in
yeah,
line with that. Is that fair?
yeah. There was a minor, like we were talking about the earlier Ipswich, the town fans panicking about relegation. There was a little scare before Millwall. They hadn't won a game and what they were playing poorly. But one of them said, "Look, we're good. We've got a good enough squad to get to mid-table. It's just a question of just coordinating them." And they looked at teams that said, "Look at Rotherham, look at Queens Park Rangers. There are some absolute basket cases
Yeah.
in the league at the moment. Whether they remain so, let's hope so." But I think mid-table and stability, get out of the financial fair play mess, and then move some of the high earners on. It's a rebalancing exercise. As I say, Luhukai, certainly a week ago, they were very worried about him, and they wonder whether this. It's interesting whether he's a fits and starts manager. He'll have a good spell. Like they were saying when he first arrived in January, he had a brilliant spell. He had a great spell at the end of the season, proper wobbly spell around February, March time. So he could be one of these managers who
Ali
he
Johnson.
yeah, it'll click for a while, and that's why I think this idea has come up with. It'll probably serve them well for a little run. Whether or not it lasts them, it's a long-term thing. I don't know, but they've absolutely respected the decisions he's made, given that they worked out at Millwall. He made some really big calls, and they've given him huge credit for that.
And then as I said at the start, the kind of opinion has kind of swayed with him when he was appointed. I think the overwhelming thought was underwhelmingness.
Yeah.
And who is this guy?
Mm.
Clearly a team that is starting to come back from overspending and maybe overreaching and now finding its feet. Maybe he's got a place here, and maybe he'll be given time, but presumably, is he a few results away from a sacking, or are they looking for more stability at Wednesday?
I think they are looking for more stability. I think if he can be made to make it work, they'd rather have that. The last thing you want is have a team hampered by financial fair play with an unbalanced squad. They can see that he's using the resources he's got to the best of his ability, and I think he will be cut some slack. But there is. It might be a good idea to move on to this. The fact that other out-of-work managers are being linked with the club. Linked with the club.
Do you have a specific manager in mind there, Harry?
Yeah, maybe. I was going to introduce this because, as I say, at the moment they're happy. In a month's time, if the previous pattern flares back up again of sort of the limp football and indifferent results, the tumbles will be beating again. And I'm going to post to everybody watching and everyone listening. I've got this idea of the great Mick in sweepstake, and the challenge is how many. Put it up on Twitter, feedback however you want. How many opponents will have a Mick in thread before he lands another job? Because there were 2 threads in the Sheffield Wednesday forum before the Millwall game. What is it with this Mick McCarthy attraction? His teams would win few awards for style, but they're always organised, something we're plainly not at the moment. He's used to working with a tight budget. He knows the division inside out,
Yeah.
and he knows how to get a team promoted from this division and says it how it is. I would say Big Mick is exactly what we need right now. So there's the first.
There you go.
I think we're going to have 6 before he finally lands a job. I'm interested to get everyone's thoughts on that, but it just occurred to me, this is the first time I've seen it, and I don't think it's going to be the last time.
No, well, we need to play some of these basket case clubs that you referred to earlier. I think particularly the ones that are kind of based around the M25, because I think he lives East London way. I think they're a good shout.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the kind of it's like the solar eclipse moment would be us doing a preview of that thread, and he gets the job the next day for that club. I think that would be perfect. Maybe yes.
Well,
Tell
how?
us what you think about
Yeah,
the Mick in sweepy. We'll
yeah,
see whether there's any support for that. I'm sure there will be.
yeah.
Um,
Mm.
let's move on, shall we, to Ipswich, and the threat or not that we might pose to Sheffield Wednesday, and the possible things that Hurst
Yeah,
has got to consider. Quite a few questions going back to the Twitter
yeah,
questions on systems. I think we are, before I kind of go too far on those questions from Paul, or thoughts from Paul Warner and Andy G, um, and someone's talked about plan Bs. I think we are united in our view that Paul Hurst won't change his system, will
no,
we?
no, no,
And the debates about two up front, I think, are redundant as well.
totally.
Yep.
Yeah,
Um, so I think we're sticking with that system. I think the key is as we kind of talked about for Sheffield Wednesday, is getting the players further up the pitch to
yeah.
support the one up front. Any thoughts on what he might do to achieve that? Would you see Eden coming back in for Ward, perhaps, or what's your thoughts there, Harry?
The I I know that we've been linked with a number of loan signings, and we definitely need strengthening at centre back, and we need a left winger. No question about that. Um, the one player I think Hurst may be missing, and I'm going to lob this out to everyone thinking, Abu Ogogo was brilliant for him at Shrewsbury. He was a bustling, industrious midfielder. And watching the Derby game, I didn't feel we had bustling industry about us. Nolan isn't a he's not the kind of striker who'll bounce off players. It's not like Bogle. He won't bounce off players. He's somebody. He's geometric and clever with his passing and incisive. But I just feel we lack a bit of presence in there. I wondered whether, I don't know. Do you put Ward in the middle and Eden on the left as he go back on the left wing again, or would you put Eden in the middle because he was breaking forward at Exeter?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it could be Ward has redeemed himself. He didn't wasn't a huge threat at Derby, but he was certainly more alert. He was more engaged. He was very much in the game. And him and Knudsen were they were combining quite well on that side. They were, at least they were getting up the field, and most of our late threats were, if were on that side. So, but it's a question of it's the Skuse Chalobah debate, which is really raising its head with everyone.
Yeah, and might be kind of a moot point, because I think Skuse is a doubt for Saturday.
Yeah,
And I guess my thought is whether Skuse has obviously been a really valuable member of the squad, and it is experience that we need, and I
yeah.
think is probably a better fit at that deeper lying role. But if Chalobah's
Mhm.
going to be having that role, um, is Skuse being out maybe for a week a possibility to try something a bit braver there?
Yeah.
And if so, who do we think Eden might be a good shout for that kind of the role in there with Chalobah? Or I'm picking my
Well,
brain
this
about
is
who
the
that
thing.
might be.
As I said, I was looking at the Derby program and looking through our squad, and I mean, well, Derby's totally bloated. And you're looking at through the options you've got, in terms of who you could put into midfield, and it is thin. I wonder. I know no one's talked about another midfielder. We want Emma Hughes to come back
Yeah.
and not be injured, and that's the problem solved in many ways. But that is a gamble. For now, I'd probably put Eden and Ward. Which way? I've no idea. One on the left and one in the midfield,
Mm.
and it's. I'm glad I'm not making the decision. To
No,
be
well, the
quite
injury
honest.
situations are.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I wonder whether the 8-0 win for the under 23s against Hull. I
Yeah.
guess you can't read a huge amount into that, but apparently Rowe played well, hat
Well.
trick, I think.
Yeah.
Hughes played for a bit in that game as well, probably
Yeah.
a long way away. But I think Rowe might have a shot of being
Rowan,
involved.
he was good at Exeter. He came on. We didn't do a lot, but it was late in the game. But he was lively. He was a presence, and he stretched. He did stretch Exeter. So that would be. I didn't dare mention him, but yeah, if Rowe was, depending on Hurst felt he was. He would, if he's strong enough, if not to come in, could you do two halves? Mick used to do that a lot, where if he was struggling to fill a position, he'd put one person in to get a bright 45 minutes out of them, and then flip it over at half time or after 55 minutes and do it that way. So maybe have somebody to do a holding job, and then drop in and drop Rowe in then for the for the bulk of the second half if he didn't feel he was up to it. That would be a kind of a good patch up kind of job. On the left side they'll be up against Palmer, who has been lethargic, but he came alive and was very up and down, because remember they have that bright right winger on that side, Preston. So the other interesting battle will be Gwion Edwards against Penny, the young left back, if he does start. Because he won't obviously be, it won't be Forsyth, so that'll be a fascinating battle as well.
Yeah, well, and if Edwards is up for it, that might be a real good opportunity for us to attack down that left hand side.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that I'll kind of weave in here as well, about tomorrow, but more with next Sunday in mind. Jonathan Cook asks, can we get it together in time for a certain game next Sunday? I think there's a similar question. Where are we? I mean, it's clearly a win on the board sooner rather than later is important, just to give everyone a bit of confidence that the Hurst plan is coming together and this approach is going to click.
Yeah.
But do you see us going into Norwich winless? And do you think that's a problem?
It's a possibility we could go in winless. I mean, this game is certainly, Hillsborough could break. They're not the threat that Derby were. They're not the challenge Derby were, and that game could break in any one of three ways. We could win it, and we could just as easily draw it. I wouldn't, you can't rule that out. If we set up right and we go after them, I don't think it's a problem myself. For the fans, I think it would be more of a concern. The league table is so nascent. I don't think the players would be so worried about it.
Hurst doesn't feel to worry about it, does he?
No, I don't think so. It's if Norwich were suddenly to take the game to us and we were winless and then suddenly 2 down, then we might have a problem. But that's being brutally pessimistic, to be quite honest, because we keep going back to it. We've seen enough brightness in this team to know that we can certainly live with Norwich. But as I say, I haven't had a proper forensic look at them, but we'll certainly come back to that next week.
Yeah. And it was
Mm.
Barry, apologies Barry, who was asking kind of a similar thing about a win going into the derby being a benefit. I think it is, but
yeah,
I don't think it's the end of the world if we don't win on Saturday.
Either way.
I think it will be a draw on Saturday, possibly. Yeah. I think. Any thoughts on a prediction there, Harry? Can I?
Yeah, I said 1-1 last week. It does have a feel of another good draw. I think we've enough about us to compete with them. And another good 1-1 draw is eminently achievable.
Yes, I will back you up on that one. And
Yeah.
I've already said I don't know if I've tweeted it, so I can't bring it out and quote it, that the Norwich game would be our first win of the season. I had a feeling about it. The script is written for you, Mr. Hurst. I think that's it for Sheffield Wednesday, Harry. I do have one more question, but have we missed anything important out from your forensic research?
They did tiny little thing. They are vulnerable on the counter. Minor, tiny little thing. Ben picked up on this in the post-match report from Brentford in his video report, and Millwall nearly equalised against them on Wednesday with that tiny little like forensic detail, but not vital. But just keep a small eye out for that one as well. That was something, little pattern that picked up that they did pick up on, because they were so, particularly against Millwall, they were so on the front foot. But and
we had a few opportunities to break through against Derby, didn't we? And
we did,
as you talked about with those tactical fouls and yellow cards. So possibly something in there. That's great. Thank you, Harry, as always, for that. I was going to skip through this question, and you've asked me to sort of read it out. So Mikey Smith, who we all know and love from the Blue Monday team, who is Sweet Caroline? Harry, there is more to this question than meets the eye. Is there not?
I did look just to see. I found reference to some Reading goal music, and one guy saying, "I'm not drunk enough for this." There's in reference to a. Oh God, you ready for this? They did have, and I'm not going to sing it. And Ben, who is very musical, as we all know, is going to be wincing.
We'll have an a cappella.
I'm not going a cappella, but the song went Glenn Lou Uvans. He has never been so good. So that's we do research all our questions, all questions asked, and that's what I've come back with.
Yes.
So
there's proof if anyone ever needed it of the quality of the questions that it takes to be featured on the preview show. Harry, thank you for that. I'll do some plugs and then we'll come back and finish off. So the Blue Monday, you can follow us at Twitter at Blue Monday ITFC. You can follow me at Ipswich. Harry, quickly, let's do your plugs, your Twitter and your blogs.
At Harry from Bath, the Sheffield Wednesday piece will go up tomorrow, or sorry, Friday morning. It normally goes up on TWTD. We're doing this Thursday night, and at Harry from Bath, if you go into my list of tweets, you'll see all of the different reports that I pop up. They're all listed in sort of reverse chronological order.
Fantastic. You can follow Ben, the birthday boy Ben, as we are recording it. It's Ben's birthday. Happy birthday to you, Ben. Along with Fabian Vilnes and Simon Milton as well. So happy birthday to all of you. Dave, you can follow at David Diamond 3. Mikey and his brilliant questions at Mikey_Smith13, at Joe Fairs, and Statman at Chompex3. The flagship show is back on Sunday with Ben and Dave again, and possibly me. So apologies in advance if that is the case. And we shall see what will happen on Saturday, leading into a week of hopefully high build-up, big pressure, and hopefully, finally, a victory against Norwich. We can dream. We can dream, hopefully.
We can dream.
Harry, a pleasure. Thank you again for all of your hard work. And
Thank you, Rich.
Meet up hopefully next week and pick the bones out of the derby.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. Thank
you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye-bye.